Hello and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to cover natural, benefic, and malefic planets or Grahas in Vedic Astrology or Jyotish. Before I get into it, though, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for their support of my work and this channel. Everybody who subscribes, everybody who posts a comment. Anybody who offers a donation, it's all appreciated, and I just wanted to appreciate you for that. And also, again, it's all feedback for me in terms of the work that I'm doing here. So thank you for that. All right. So, also, if you're new to the channel, I create Vedic Astrology or Jyotish teaching videos. You can find all of them in my Concepts playlist. In addition, if you're interested in this video, you may be interested in other videos, although you don't necessarily, you can actually start with this one without much background. But other videos you might be interested, any of my Symbolism of the Planets videos, so I have videos on the moon, Symbolism of the moon, Symbolism of the sun, Symbolism of Mars, Symbolism of Mercury, already done, and I'll be doing the other planets soon. I also have a video on North, South, and East Indian style charts if you want to get to know about charts. There's also a video on Introduction to the Constellations or Rashis, which can be helpful. And then there's another video, the Lagna or Ascendant Rising Sign First House, which can be, those are all important videos if you're just starting out with Jyotish or astrology. So you might consider those as well. Alright, so back on topic here. So first of all, what is a natural, benefic, or malefic planet, or graha? Graha is planet in Sanskrit. Well, you can really just look to the general, dictionary definition of these words. So benefic, if you look it up, means things like beneficent, kindly, favorable influence, and generally promoting good. Malefic means causing disaster, harmful, causing destruction, unfavorable influence. So you get a general idea of what these words mean and how we use them in astrology. And what we're talking about here is natural benefic or malefic. So there is also something called temporal benefics and malefics, which is a different thing and a different subject. So you got to be careful when you're reading books on astrology or watching videos on astrology, because we don't always say natural or temporal. Probably most people mean natural when they're talking, because that's mostly what we think about and talk about in astrology, but not always. So to be clear, you need to distinguish the two. So again, we're talking about natural benefics and malefics today. So since it's natural, you get this is the natural propensity of a planet to give positive or negative results. Okay. So some planets tend to give more favorable, kind, good results, and other planets tend to give less favorable, potentially even destructive or harmful results. And when I talk about good and bad or positive and negative, I'm talking from the very typical human subjective perspective. So, for example, most people don't want illness or bankruptcy. And so we would generally consider those, malefic outcomes. Okay. Now, again, that's the sort of mundane, living as a human, surviving in the day-to-day world, day-to-day life. But from a spiritual perspective, everything that happens is an opportunity to learn, correct, and create new positive karma. Okay, because again, especially if you're talking about Vedic astrology, we talk about how the horoscope is actually a karma scope, and what the horoscope actually tells us are areas of the life in which there's good karma and most likely going to be good fruit, positive fruit that comes from that. And then there are other areas of the chart which tend to be, more negative and will produce negative fruit or negative consequences. So that's really what we're assessing when we're looking at horoscopes and stuff. But again, it's all subjective. Some people, if they get sick, sometimes that can lead to, a whole new way of operating and valuing relationships and things that they do, places that they go. So, again, it depends. But probably, if that's the case, there's probably a natural benefic planet involved, is how we would interpret it as an astrologer. And when we're talking about karma, again, karma is another word that's thrown around fairly loosely, but karma is basically any thought, word, or action, and the consequence of having that thought, word, or action. Sometimes it's just like if you do something, malicious to somebody, then it's going to come and bite you back. There's sometimes that kind of notion. But, again, it's not just actions or deeds, but the thoughts that you have. If you have positive or negative, supportive or diminishing thoughts about yourself or somebody else, that's a kind of karma. If you speak positively, negatively, in an uplifting way or diminishing way, that's another kind of karma. So again, karmas generate from thoughts, words, and actions, not just actions. Okay, so I think we covered most of the slide. Let's move on. All right, so there's some planets that are always benefic and always malefic, so always clear like what these planets tend to deliver in people's lives. So the planets that are always benefic are Jupiter, or Guru in Sanskrit, and Venus, or Shukra in Sanskrit. So Jupiter and Venus, always benefic. On the malefic side, there's Sun, or Surya, Mars, or Mangal, Saturn, or Shani, and then Rahu, Ketu. Okay, so this is 7 out of the 9 planets that we typically assess in classical Jyotish. So these are the ones that are, you look at them, you're like, benefic. You look at this one, malefic. Now, the 2 exceptions, though, that can swing either way are the Moon and Mercury. So let's look at those. So let's look at the Moon first, or Chandra. So we're going to get a little bit technical first, and then I'm going to come up with the answer. But you kind of need to know the technical stuff to figure out what the answer is as to whether the moon is benefic, in a benefic position, or malefic position in a chart. So let's begin at the beginning here. So a new moon happens at exactly 0 degrees from the sun. So when the moon and the sun are right on top of each other, the sun is going to eclipse the moon. The moon has no light in it. It doesn't shine any light in the sky. That's a new moon. Now, exactly opposite to that, when the moon is exactly 180 degrees away from the sun, it catches all the light, it reflects all the light from the sun. It's a bright, big, beautiful moon. It'll light your way through a dark night. So that's a full moon. So those are the 2 extremes. New moon at exactly 0 degrees, and then full moon at exactly 180 degrees away from the sun. Then you start moving into nuance and sort of shades of gray, or different phases of the moon. So 30 degrees on either side of a new moon, so that's either plus or minus 30 degrees from the sun. We would call this a newish moon. So it's a little bit softer. There's a little bit more range here. Okay, still, we wouldn't call it dark, but it's a newish moon. Not exactly a new moon, but a newish moon. Okay. Now, on the opposite side, if you are within 30 degrees of a full moon, that's what we would call a fullish moon. So it's not an exact full moon, but within 30 degrees of being a full moon, we call that a fullish moon. Okay. Now, if we go back to the new moon side, if we go 72 degrees out on either side from a new moon, that's considered a dark moon. And you can see in this diagram here, these kind of longer, dark purple arrows. This is the range, so that's going to be 72 degrees on either side of a new moon, and that's considered a dark moon. Okay, so if we go more than 72 degrees away from a new moon, and if you look at the bright green arrows here, when you're in the bright green arrow range or more than 72 degrees from a new moon, that's considered a bright moon. Okay, so there are all these terms about the moon here. You got to get them straight. Okay, so if we start closest to the sun and move out in order, right on top of the sun, if the moon is right on top of the sun, exact 0 degrees, that's a new moon. If you go 30 degrees out from that, either way, that's a newish moon. If you go 72 degrees out from the sun, that's considered a dark moon. If you go beyond 72 degrees, that's considered a bright moon. And if you get to the last 30 degrees away from the sun, that's considered a fullish moon. And if you're exactly 180 degrees from the sun, that's an exact full moon. Okay, so it goes new, newish, dark, bright, fullish, full. Okay, so what does that mean? So I had to tell you all this stuff because moon is benefic when it's bright. So that means when it's more than 72 degrees away from the sun. It's malefic when it's dark. So if it's within 72 degrees of the sun. Got it? So that 72 degrees point is the marker. But I had to lay this all out because otherwise if you just throw out bright and dark, it doesn't always make sense. So I wanted to give you like all the kind of different aspects of the moon that we're assessing as astrologers. All right, so the moon's benefic when it's bright, meaning more than 72 degrees away from the sun. It's malefic when it's dark or within 72 degrees of the sun. All right, so that's the moon. And then there's Mercury or Buddha. So Mercury by itself, so it's, again, Mercury can swing either way. So if Mercury is by itself, so if you look in this chart here, I have 3 different houses that are filled potentially with different ways that Mercury can show up. So if Mercury is by itself, so if we look at the second house here in that kind of lavender color, Mercury by itself is considered a benefic planet. It tends to give benefic results. The thing though is that if Mercury is conjoined with or associated with or in the same house with other benefics, it becomes even more benefic. If, however, Mercury is with malefic planets, it will become malefic. So again, if we look at this chart here, Mercury by itself, the lavender color, that would be considered benefic. In the 4th house here, we have Mercury with all the malefics, Sun, Mars, Saturn, Rahu, Ketu. So if Mercury is with any of these planets, it would be considered malefic. If we look in the 7th house here in that kind of orange color, Mercury's with the other benefics, Jupiter and Venus. So when you get Mercury with Jupiter or Venus, it's going to be even more benefic. Now, if you have a mix, that's the thing, is that's where it gets tricky, and that's where it sort of comes down to. If you have a mix of malefic and benefic planets on Mercury, you have to start to kind of figure out, like, is there more malefic influence or more benefic influence? And that comes down to the number of planets that are malefic or benefic on Mercury. It also comes down to their condition. So are they strong? Are they weak? Are they neutral? All right. And just so you know, if you're doing yoga vichara, yoga is a planetary combinations. If you're looking at specific planetary combinations or analyzing those, in that circumstance, in that level of analysis, Mercury is always a benefic. Okay, so moon, you have to think about and kind of figure that out based on degrees away from the sun, and Mercury, you have to figure out what is influencing Mercury, whether things are swinging it to the benefic side or the malefic side. All right, so